Update: my daughter disrespected me in public by flirting with a random guy who was threatening to assault me, so I refused to pay for her car on her birthday. So I got home about an hour ago and my wife called me into the room to talk. She gave me an ultimatum. She said I can either swallow my pride and buy my daughter the car, or she will buy the car out of her own money. My wife doesn't earn as much as me, but still has a well-paying job and can afford it. She said that everyone is sick of my attitude in public, that every time we go out I get in some sort of altercation or disagreement with someone over some petty stuff. I think this is a gross over-exaggeration, but my wife showed me texts from my daughter asking if she can go out with just my wife because I always do something to embarrass everyone. My wife refused and defended me, saying that's not true, and that's why when I got into that argument my wife said nothing about my daughter's actions. She said she isn't going to punish my daughter because I can never keep my mouth shut, especially when my daughter said she didn't want me there because something like this would happen, and she defended me only to be made to look like a fool. She says that my daughter barely likes me as it is, and if I do this I shouldn't be shocked when she stops talking to me completely. I asked my wife if all I am to my daughter is a piggy bank and she told me to stop playing the victim. She said it's up to me what I do with my money, but my daughter will be getting the car one way or another, so I can either make her hate me for no reason, or I can swallow my pride and get her the car myself. Don't really know where to go from here. Edit. After everything I called my daughter and over because I wanted to talk about everything. My wife said to just let it go, but clearly everyone had a problem with me that I didn't know about, so I wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I waited for my son to get home, and my daughter drove around a little later. We all sat down and decided to talk. I started by asking for actual examples, rather than just accepting their word for it, and honestly a lot of it sounded ridiculous. The fact that I sent back a steak twice because both times it was undercooked, as if it's a crime to want a 180-pound steak cooked correctly. The fact that I argued with someone who sat in our assigned seats at a cinema even though it was nearly empty, again, as if it's a crime to want to sit in the seat I paid for when there's dozens of other places for these people to sit, and other equally silly things which I can't be bothered to get into and don't even really remember as a result of the insignificance of it. Despite me thinking that it was all ridiculous, I said I would do my best to be a meek pushover in public if that was the only way to get them to like me, and that I would get the car on one condition: that my daughter hadn't actually texted the guy who abused me. I asked to look at her messages, and she said not to even bother, because she had texted him and I didn't have the right to control who she talks to. I said that is true, but I do have the right to spend my money on whatever I want, and I'm not getting my daughter a car. She has one that works fine, and even if I am an ass, in a situation where her family is getting threatened, she sided with the aggressor and then doubled down on that, and that is unforgivable. My daughter blew up at me, and said that I am a petty little pig-headed man, with a Napoleon complex, and that all the money in the world hasn't stopped me from being a effing loser. I said oh yeah, because the guy who screams at old men is such a winner. And she screamed at me that I'm not a victim, and then something about how cathartic it was to watch someone stand up to me, and that how the second he did she watched me shrink back into the little beach I'd always been growing up. That was the last straw. I told her to get out, but she doubled down and told me that my wife had told them about me being bullied growing up, and that was why I am the way I am. I saw my wife turn pale as a ghost at this comment. This is something I confided in her in private. Clearly this is why my daughter stopped respecting me. Obviously I wasn't cool enough for her or whatever. I was speechless, but my daughter carried on. She said ask her brother what he really thinks. Her brother begged not to be put in the middle of this, but I insisted. All he said was sometimes you can be a bit much, Dad. My daughter called him a wimp, and just walked out. My son ran off to his room, and my wife drove off after my daughter. She didn't come back last night. I've not heard from my wife or daughter since.